Hello, D2 fans, and welcome to a special edition of Inside D2 Football. It's our newest venture in D2Football.com. It's our debut episode of the Super Region 1 Playoff Podcast. I'm Chuck Bitner. I'll be your host and part-time subject matter expert, longtime contributor to D2Football.com. I'm currently the national columnist and also former PSAC columnist and SAC columnist. Alongside me is Cary Moyer, our incumbent PSAC columnist and PSAC insider. Over the next couple of weeks, Cary and I are going to take a look at the Super Region 1 playoff field, talk about the teams, talk about the games, talk about what we expect to see as the playoffs play out over the next couple of weeks. Cary and I both have a lot of experience in this type of format, doing these types of things, but our first podcast doing this together. So if there's a few false starts along the way, we hope that you'll extend a little bit of forgiveness. So, Cary, when we first started talking about doing this a couple weeks ago, I thought, well, this will be easy. We'll just throw up a picture of the Super Region 1 bracket. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the games. And then we got a little bit of a surprise from the playoff committee. So we actually have one of our teams that's going to play in a different region. Did you think that might be something that would happen on Selection Sunday?
No. I mean, obviously there was a lot last week, talk about, the opportunities for the earned access coming in, but thinking we would have someone coming in and someone going out into another super region. And I know talking to a lot of folks leading up to Selection Sunday and the reveal, all the guesswork on who is going to be playing who, and, talking to some of the SIDs here in the PSAC and, trying to speculate and prepare for who they may possibly have coming in, kind of got blown up a little bit.
So I thought maybe where we'll start is just let's talk about the teams from Super Region 1 that made the playoffs, and then we'll actually pivot and look at our bracket and talk about where we had some changes that got thrown into the mix. So the number 1 seed in Super Region 1, the Tiffin Dragons, they actually ended up being the only undefeated team that came out of Super Region 1, went into the final week with 2, and only 1 came out. So Tiffin is your undefeated champion of the Great Midwest Athletic Conference, locked down that number 1 seed and the all-important first-round bye. Number 2 seed, the Charleston Eagles, 9-1, conference champions in the Mountain East, making their first appearance in the playoffs since 2015. The 3rd seed, Kutztown, newly crowned PSAC champions, finished 9-2. And, of course, got that big win over Slippery Rock last week at Andre Reed Stadium. And rounding out the seeded teams, Slippery Rock in that 4th position, slipping from the potential number 1 seed down to the 4th position after falling in the PSAC champion. The remaining 3 teams are technically unseeded, Shepherd and East Stroudsburg out of the PSAC, and Northeast 10 champions, New Haven. Cary, were there any surprises or anything unexpected from your point of view when the bracket was revealed and we actually saw the teams from Super Region 1 that made the playoffs?
For the ones that did, again, kind of, just going back to what we said, there's a 4th team from the PSAC here who, we fully expected to be in the Super Region 1 bracket. Of course, they're in another super region. I know you'll talk about that in a minute. But I think, part of it was, from when they started releasing, the top 10 in each of the super regions, of course, and I focused on this a lot, Slippery Rock at that point, running the table, the amount of points they were putting up a game, so I was really, behind that as well, the front runner as the number 1 seed in the super region. So obviously, with the PSAC championship game not going their way, obviously, opened the door for the undefeated team to be the first seed. But no, really excited. And, the other part of this, from the PAC perspective is, really there was another big game besides the championship game last week, and that was, with East Stroudsburg and California, PA. And, that was pretty much dubbed all week for both of those teams winning in. And, that's how it played out. East Stroudsburg with the big win over Cali, PA. And so, the Warriors are in and the Vulcans, their season's done.
Yeah, that was very impressive to me too, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that. But East Stroudsburg kind of coming off that tough loss at Shepherd and coming back with a huge win. They even admitted, probably one of the biggest wins they've had at East Stroudsburg in quite a few years, and gets them into the playoffs for the first time since 2009. The only drama that I really was coming up with heading into Selection Sunday was where was Kutztown going to fall in these rankings, because we knew that they were going to go up a spot or two. I had actually wondered if they could go up as high as number 2 with the quality of the win that they had. In the end, I think that they got this right. I think it should have been Tiffin number 1, obviously, Charleston number 2. And Kutztown, I think at 3 was the right choice. I think you could have made an argument to put them up at 2, but I think 3 was the right place for them to land. And obviously, Slippery Rock, tough loss in that game, but this is still a 10-1 football team. So hosting a first-round playoff game, being at home, is certainly something that they deserve. A couple of other things that were really noteworthy. Frostburg State came back with a big win against Fairmont State. They kind of knocked Fairmont State out of the playoff picture. They were in the conversation. And really, if you go back the week before that, Glenville State got a huge win over Frostburg. Cary, I think if that win over Frostburg State that Glenville had, I think if that doesn't happen, we probably would not be looking at East Stroudsburg here in the playoffs, and that would probably be Frostburg State. So, it really gets hot and heavy in those last couple weeks of the season. And when it all shakes out, this is the field that we have. I'll tell you something else that's really noteworthy about this. If you look at those 7 teams, those 7 logos, Kutztown has beaten 3 of those teams already in this season. That's pretty remarkable. It's not very often that you have a team that's beaten 3 other playoff teams in their same bracket.
So, and that kind of, lends to all the old footballisms that are out there. It's always hard to win the second game. Potentially we could see that down the road. So, and ironically, again, Kutztown, just that slow start at the beginning, and the one team that could have been in here that did beat them early in the season, Calipier, did not make the bracket. But of course, they ran the table in the PSAC East by beating both East Stroudsburg and Shepherd, so that's really, that's it. So when you look at both the teams from the East and the West that were in the championship game, both of them were, undefeated in their respective divisional play. And so again, it's, you get, control the controllable, and you talked about it a little bit with some of the stuff that went down in week 11, some teams needed some help possibly to get in, but control the controllable, another football thing, go out, whoever your opponent is that you've got, in front of you, beat them. And I think that's kind of, the marching orders for, this Saturday and beyond for those teams that win. You just got to line up, play ball. And we're at the point now, there is no tomorrow. So you have to, keep winning to keep going.
So let's take a look at our actual bracket, and you're kind of circling back to what we were talking about there with Kutztown having those wins over a couple teams already. This bracket actually sets up well for them to kind of avoid that second rematch with some of those teams. Now, obviously, they've still got a difficult path. There's no easy path in the playoffs. I always bristle a little bit when fans or journalists talk about this is an easier path or this is a harder path. There's no easy path in the playoffs. But if you're Kutztown, you certainly don't want to have to beat teams like Shepherd or Slippery Rock and East Stroudsburg a second time. Well, one of those teams is actually in a completely different bracket. Shepherd is playing in Super Region 2, and we've got Slippery Rock and East Stroudsburg. One of them will be eliminated this weekend. So a potential rematch for one of those previous opponents for Kutztown wouldn't actually come until a bit later in this bracket. So not such a bad situation for them. But this is our first opportunity to introduce and talk about Virginia Union. Virginia Union actually was moved into Super Region 1, and Shepherd was swapped out. So we normally would have seen Shepherd perhaps in one of these spots. The Rams are playing in the Super Region 2 bracket. We're going to talk about their game a little bit later on. Virginia Union comes in as an unseeded and will play at Kutztown. So let's talk about how and why that would have happened, because this is still a little bit of a new concept or a new thing for the committees to move teams into different regions. That's a rule or an option, I guess would be a better way to say that. That's an option that's really only been available to the committee for a couple of years, and I think this may only be the second time that they've actually invoked that and swapped a team into a different region. So one of the things that this allows for is avoiding a rematch in the first round of the playoffs of a game that already occurred. So if Shepherd was still playing within this bracket, they would have had to play either at Slippery Rock or at Kutztown. Both of those would then create a rematch at Kutztown because, of course, Kutztown's already played East Stroudsburg or Shepherd. So then we kind of have to unpeel another layer of this and talk about the New Haven and Charleston matchup, because the natural thought would be, well, why couldn't they send New Haven to Kutztown, send Shepherd to Charleston, and East Stroudsburg to Slippery Rock? That could have been an easy way to avoid that first round matchup. Well, to me, that's a pretty obvious tell that New Haven is in the bracket through an earned access invitation, not truly that seventh seed. Now, we're not here to rehash the earned access rule and talk about whether we like that or don't like that. That's irrelevant. New Haven's in the field. But if they are in the field as an earned access bid, by rule, a team in via earned access must play a number 2 seed. So the fact that New Haven is going to Charleston, which, by the way, is a flight that's beyond the 600-mile distance that would enforce that they travel by bus, if we're flying them to Charleston instead of busing them to Kutztown or even Slippery Rock, which would be a busable distance, that to me means that they're in the field through earned access. So with having to send them to Charleston, that's what really kind of created the opportunity to move a team into this region that would avoid a first round rematch at Kutztown. Is your head hurt after all that, Cary?
That's why I defer to those higher level decisions that are made, Chuck. No, and I know a lot of people throughout the week, starting all the way back with the bracket releases, and of course when Super Region 1 came out, and where's the team that's missing, and then a lot of questions afterwards. But I think one of the things that I picked up early, again, with your godfatherly wisdom was, with those earned access teams coming in, they've got to play that number 2 team. But again, there's always a lot of dynamics with it. And, for a lot of folks, once we get to this point, really, the NCAA is doing a lot with, the funding, the travel, those types of things as well when you get to playoffs. So, and those things of, well, it's 598 miles. So, but, with that 600, that's a magic mark with it. So, but no, your explanation has always been appreciated by me, and I'm sure by many others out there.
Yeah, by the way, it's about 8 miles over the 600 mile threshold to get New Haven to Charleston. It's amazing how close that can be sometimes. So all that said, Cary, this creates a really exciting bracket for us. I'm thinking back over the last 2 years. The playoff games in this region were some of the best football that we've seen played in Division II in the last couple of years. Now, I'm not under the delusion that we're going to see a national champion come out of this bracket. We never have. Not to say that we won't in the future, but I don't expect it to be this year. But we're going to see some really good football in this bracket over the next couple of weeks. I think all of these games set up for some really exciting matchups, including some things that we didn't expect to see. So let's spend a couple minutes actually just going through this game by game, talk a little bit about some of these teams for some folks that may not be familiar, and just kind of give some thoughts about what we expect to see. So let's start with our first matchup, a PSAC versus PSAC East, and this is East versus West, although these two teams did not play during the regular season, so it's not a rematch. East Stroudsburg at Slippery Rock. Cary, I have to think these teams are sort of in different places coming into this. They're kind of coming from different directions. Slippery Rock had the really difficult, kind of stunning loss last week, and East Stroudsburg had, again, as even they said, one of the biggest wins that they've had in years. So kind of different momentum coming into this game for both teams.
Definitely, some different momentum coming in, but again, both these teams are earned their way in here, and with Slippery Rock, okay, they had a little bit of a slip up last week, no pun intended there. But when you look at it, go back to last season and kind of take a look at Shepherd and IUP and kind of the same scenario. And you had what happened in the PSAC championship game, and then a few weeks later, it was the exact opposite, in the outcome of the game. So again, Slippery Rock would not have gone into the PSAC championship game undefeated if they were not a good football team. Of course, being in the PSAC again to the back and forth, who's stronger this year? Is it the East? Is it the West? I think one of the things that's really kind of noteworthy too, for East Stroudsburg, of course, with the crossover weeks early in the season, and then week 11, they played IUP. Played a healthy IUP team early in the season and beat them. And then they played Cal last week in week 11 and beat them as well. So those are traditionally, when you look at Gannon's had some good years here recently as well, but it's usually a knock them down, drag them out here in recent years between Slippery Rock, IUP, and Cal. So again, the PSAC West, heavy hitters, that was not a favorable schedule for East Stroudsburg, drawing those two this season. So, of course, East Stroudsburg beat both of those teams. Slippery Rock beat both of those teams. So we'll start to get to see on Saturday, which one of these two teams will win.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Slippery Rock's going to figure that out. I think it was a bad day to have a bad day at Kutztown last week. And the Golden Bears it was kind of one of those days where everything came together from them. They had a great game plan, executed extremely well. They had the home crowd behind them, but Slippery Rock's going to move on from that and figure it out. I think this is a very difficult game. On the East Stroudsburg side, the Warriors have had to plug in a lot of different quarterbacks throughout the season. They've had some injury troubles. At times, it kind of felt like even when they were healthy there, maybe they weren't totally sure which one gave them the best chance to win. But they've had success with 3 different players at the quarterback position. What do you think maybe we will see on Saturday under center for the Warriors?
I'll give a little background, and then maybe we can, take a look at what we may see. So, again, just doing a quick comparison here. So, East Stroudsburg's had, 3 different quarterbacks that have been, really good at times, and each of them's played 6, 7, 8 games. Again, there were some injury things at different points in the season, but just looking at the quarterback position. Of course, with Braden Long, at Slippery Rock, the PSAC West, offensive player of the year, been lights out all season, 3,061 yards, 33 touchdowns. If you add up the sums of the 3 quarterbacks from East Stroudsburg, they've thrown for 2,232 yards and 28 touchdowns. So again, not too shabby. I was at their opening game against Pace, Thursday night, the season opener for 2023. And, Aaron Tobias was the starting quarterback, and he was lights out. And I talked about this, posted on Twitter, the X about it. I don't remember when I've seen a more complete game out of a team than I did from East Stroudsburg in week 1. Offense, defense, special teams. It was like they were in midseason form already. And we start to see, some injury bugs and some switches up. So, there's also, Charlie McKee and, Sean McTaggart, the 3 quarterbacks. And, looking at, the things last week, Charlie McKee came in the second half, taking over for Sean McTaggart. And, was 7 of 11, 228 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. He had another 1 rushing. So if I had to speculate, if everybody's healthy, I would speculate, that, McKee would come in, as the starter in this game. So again, they've all been successful. I've seen, Kutztown play, all these teams that we're talking about live from the East with East Stroudsburg, Shepherd, of course, we both saw them play, with with Slippery Rock last week. So again, they've got, I'm sure there's some teams out there that would love to have any one of those three guys, as their signal caller for the season. So it's it's going to be interesting.
And on the Slippery Rock side, of course, we know who's going to be under center for them. Braden Long, he's had a phenomenal season. Cary, I think that Slippery Rock really needs to focus on getting Kyle Sheets involved in this game early. I don't think he had a catch until the final series of that game last week. Good news for Slippery Rock. I'm not going to be there at the game this week because I was at the season opener against Wayne State, and Kyle actually got hurt on like the first or second snap of that game, did not return. And then I was at the game last week at Kutztown, and it was just a tough day for them pushing the ball down the field, and they weren't able to get the ball to Kyle. So I'm not going to be there. So that's hopefully a good omen for the Rock. But I think it's got to be a priority for them to get him involved in the game plan early on, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, statistically, the best receiver, in all the PSAC this year. And again, I mean, if you just watch clips of him, he's a physical mismatch. Pretty much every week, going in. And, like you said, week one, he went out early there, first, second series, didn't play the rest of the game, came back week two. So when you look at it, the amount of, yards he put up, almost close to 100 yards per game, over 1,000 for the season with the 11 games. That's just, that's incredible. When you look at Slippery Rock, and the amount of touchdowns he had at one point in the season, he had more touchdowns than everybody receiving D1, FBS, FCS, and Division II. But when you take a look at Slippery Rock and their offense, this is part of what I talk about too. It's Braden Long, obviously an elite level quarterback. Kyle Sheets, an elite level receiver, but you also have Cohen Russell, another wide receiver who statistically is part of the top three. Kyle Sheets is number one, Cohen Russell number three. So you've got two of the top receivers in all of the PSAC, on that team. Then you look at, Khalid Dorsey, who was, just today. So I was trying to crunch all that with all the PSAC selections coming out. Of course, Coach Lutz for the West was the PSAC West Coach of the Year. Braden Long was the Offensive Player of the Year. But first team as well as Khalid Dorsey at running back. But they really have three running backs, and I talked about this throughout the season. Depending upon down and distance, game situation, they have three backs that can kill you three different ways. So you've got an elite, receiving core. And, again, we talked to, Coach Conrad a little bit before the game, the offensive line coach at Slippery Rock. That's a veteran offensive line and a lot of PSAC West selections there as well. So again, I cannot take away from Kutztown what they did last week. That was incredible. I talked about it in my column last week. I did pick Slippery Rock. It's hard to go against the undefeated, but Kutztown played the game that they needed to play, did everything right going into that game. Braden Long had only thrown 2 interceptions all season. He threw 3, in the championship game. But again, this offense, and what they're doing, the number one offense in the PSAC, scoring over 45 points average a week with that quarterback, 2 receivers. By the way, their tight end was also first team PSAC West, and their running back core with a veteran offensive line. They're going to score points. On the flip side, again, going with footballisms, defense wins championships. They're not too shabby on D either. But again, it's hard to imagine that the Rock's not going to put up points this week.
I would agree. This is going to be a great game, and we know that East Stroudsburg, and they're a momentum team. They kind of always have been. They've got a lot of momentum coming into this. They play with swagger. They're going to show up ready. They're going to show up to fight, and I think that's going to be a fantastic game out of Slippery Rock. So that's our first game. Winner of this one will play the number 1 seed, the Tiffin Dragons. And I apologize to the Tiffin fans if you're tuning in. Since we're not playing this week, we don't have quite as much to talk about with Tiffin. But if Cary and I are able to come back next week and do this, of course, we'll be talking a lot about Tiffin. Let's move on, Cary, and take a look at our next game. I know this is a little outside your wheelhouse, but I'm really excited about this matchup as well. We have two conference champions going at it. New Haven going down to Charleston. I think that this is a game where the defense is going to have to win it, especially for New Haven. If the Chargers are going to have a chance in this, their defense is going to have to really play lights out. The good news is they are fully capable of doing that. Charleston, just at a glance, 44 points per game, a lot of different weapons that they have on offense. It's very explosive, almost a totally even split right down the middle between rush and pass. Siobhan Wright at running back. He was the Mountain East Conference Player of the Year that was announced earlier today. Alex Brink spells him a very physical runner inside. They've got two excellent ball carriers. And, of course, at the quarterback position, Javonte Howard, an excellent trigger man. So there's just a lot that they're able to do offensively. But New Haven brings in the best defense out of the Northeast 10. Only 13 points per game. That puts them among the elite defenses in all of Division II. And I think that they will have something for Charleston. What I really want to watch in this game is the battle in the trenches when Charleston has the football. The Eagles have a lot of size and a lot of strength in their offensive line. If you look at them, especially at the center and guard positions on the interior of that line, they have a lot of size. Within that small box, they move well. But I think that New Haven is going to be a little bit more athletic than them. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to win that matchup, but I think that they're going to be a little quicker off the ball, and I think they can be athletic. Now, if they can have some success putting pressure on Javonte Howard, maybe create a couple turnovers, that's how New Haven wins this game. I think they have to, one, they've got to be very aggressive at stopping the run. I think they're going to have to do some run blitzes. They're really going to have to get out, attack that Charleston offense very aggressively. I think they're going to have to take some chances in getting pressure on Javonte Howard. They may get burned a couple of times, but I think they have to get after him. That's how Fairmont State beat Charleston a couple of weeks ago. They took some chances. They put a lot of pressure on him, forced early throws, and got 3 picks out of it, including 2 that went back for touchdowns. So, if they're not able to create those plays defensively, Charleston wins that football game because that was a 3-point game at the end. So I think it's 2 very good football teams. I have no doubt that New Haven has the defense to win this game. I just don't think that they have the offense for it. It's a group that kind of looks like they should be able to control games at the line of scrimmage. They're very experienced in the offensive line, but they don't seem to have that capacity to really kind of take over a game like we think they might be able to, especially with Ace, Christopher Ace, their running back. He's a really tough inside runner. I think if they could really commit to establishing the run and be successful with it, they could probably score some points and win this game. But the passing game just really hasn't been there. It's been inconsistent for New Haven. They've been right around 50% throughout most of the year. I just worry that they don't have quite enough offense because this Charleston defense is almost as good as its offense. So I think that this is a really tough ask for the Chargers. They're going to need a lot out of their defense. But like you said, defense travels, Cary, and I think that gives New Haven a chance. And I think that this will be a really great matchup down in Charleston.
Yeah, and what I can add, a little bit from the Northeast 10 perspective too, certainly get to see them from time to time. In the early parts of the season, there's crossover games with the Northeast 10, and the PSAC, and the Bentleys, the AICs I've seen before. But I think if you look, in recent history here, who's been pretty consistent and done well in the Northeast 10, it's been New Haven. Actually got to see them live last year in Super Region 1 playoffs when they came down to Shepherd, early on in Super Region 1. So again, I think that's, part of it. Again, obviously different players, and, every year is different, but it's not uncharted territory for New Haven coming in from the Northeast 10 into Super Region 1 playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Cary. They're used to being in big games. They've been a player in the Northeast 10 for a long time. They're in conference championship contention up there a lot, have been in the playoffs, and it's a very well-coached football team. Coach Pence and his staff do a phenomenal job there. Very well-coached football team. So I have no doubt that they will be ready, and you don't let the earned access thing get in the way. This is an 8-2 football team. They're very good. They are a conference champion. And I think that's going to be a really good matchup with them in Charleston.
Yeah, definitely be interesting to see. And again, we're a little spoiled here where we're at in Pennsylvania, Chuck, with the PSAC and having 16 teams, 8 in the East, 8 in the West. That's one of the potential things. Of course, there's some teams that are a little bit ahead of some of the rest, but for New Haven, I think it'll be a good test for them this week. Maybe not having that same level of competition week in, week out, in the Northeast 10.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, they do actually have a common opponent that was on the schedule this year. Both teams played Frostburg State. New Haven actually opened their season with Frostburg coming up and playing first ever night game on the blue turf up there in New Haven. I went to overtime. It was a phenomenal football game. Frostburg State won that one. Charleston actually beat Frostburg, but both of those games were extremely competitive with the common opponents. So if you like to try to look for ways that they might match up together, you've got a common thread that you can look at. And I think it tells you that these two will be very competitive with each other. All right, let's go to what we could actually call our bonus game this week, because we have Shepherd playing outside of the region, going down to play Lenoir-Rhyne, a couple teams who've got a lot of playoff experience in the last couple of years. I think a lot of people are not sure what to make of this, Cary. It's been a while since Lenoir-Rhyne had some intersection with the PSAC. Do you remember the last time the PSAC fans might have seen the Bears?
There may have been a time since then, but I can take it back a decade ago to 10 years. It was kind of ironic with both of these teams going back to 2013 when, Westchester had a pretty incredible run that year. They had beat AIC, beat Bloomsburg after having lost to them in the regular season. And then, beat Shepherd down at Shepherd, 28-7. And then the following week going to the NCAA semifinals, going down to Lenoir-Rhyne. And, of course, they lost that game 42-14. But so I got to see Shepherd and Lenoir-Rhyne back-to-back a decade ago. So for the fans they're traveling down from Shepherd, Hickory is beautiful. It was not beautiful the day that I was there. That was pre-turf days. It was their grass/mud field. It rained. I didn't know if I should be building the ark or not. There was probably a foot of water around the sidelines. And a very different Lenoir-Rhyne team back then, a decade ago. I think they've always prided themselves on having a really good defense, but they ran this thing called the triple option back then. So in that game, and again, you can what if stuff forever, but I think if that would have been different weather conditions and maybe on a better playing surface, that may have been a different outcome that day. McCartney was at quarterback for Westchester, Timmy Brown, the tight end. Rondell White. I mean, they had a lot of firepower, but in that mud, they couldn't do anything. So Lenoir-Rhyne actually ran 70 plays from scrimmage in that game. Running the triple option, there it is. And I don't see any water down in the corner. So, I was sitting right down there in that corner, at the top there, hoping the water wasn't going to come up over. But they ran 70 plays at triple option, and it ended up being 42-14. Lenoir-Rhyne won that game. But again, I'm glad you have a nice sunny picture there, Chuck. And again, for any of the Shepherd fans that will be traveling down, Hickory is beautiful. Just kind of put my own little personal story to rest here with this. So I was up for about 24 hours straight, at least. So went to the game, saw the game, popped over to Charlotte. The Kobe was in town, so caught a hoops game over in Charlotte, and then started driving home. So my son, who is 24 now, was 14. We started driving home. It's like, if we got to stop, we will. But started getting up here north a little bit, went through some major fog, got into a major snowstorm, but we decided to get all the way home. So it was a great day nonetheless. got to see a great football game, a semifinal game at that level. And so that's my little personal connect here. Got to see, Shepherd and, Lenoir-Rhyne back-to-back weeks. And now 10 years later, we see, Shepherd from the PSAC East. Of course, Shepherd wasn't in the PSAC at that time, traveling down to Hickory, North Carolina to take on Lenoir-Rhyne. And I think it's going to be a great game.
Well, I do too. And I wanted to bring this up because Lenoir-Rhyne and Shepherd are two of my favorite places for Division II football, regardless of where you are in the country. I think the fan bases would actually have a lot in common. A game day at Moyer Stadium in Hickory is about as good as it gets on the East Coast, or for that matter, anywhere in Division II. I know there's some places where, national championships are played. I actually got to see Grand Valley and Ferris State. That was completely off the charts earlier this year. But Moyer Stadium, especially since it's rebuilt, is just an unbelievable venue. Beautiful place. The fans turn out. It's a very small school. You would not know that when you show up there on game day because the stadium is usually packed. The alumni really turn out. The community turns out, and it's very much that way in Shepherd. I've been to a lot of games in both places, and I think these fan bases would have a lot in common. And I want to move us along, but I'll just add on to your personal story, Cary. The very first time I was at Lenoir-Rhyne was the week after that game that Westchester played in Hickory. My dad and I were on our way down to Florence for the national championship game when they played it in Alabama. And we stopped in Hickory. We saw the stadium at about sunrise on, I think it was a Thursday or Friday morning. It was very cold. So there was a frost on the field, but that field was wrecked. Absolutely wrecked. And of course, then they installed the field turf that we see in this picture, and it's been one of D2's premier venues ever since. But just to be fair to the Shepherd crowd here's Ram Stadium. This is again why I say I think these fan bases would have a lot in common. The game day experience at both of those places is just phenomenal. Now, as for the game this week, I think it's going to be a great matchup. I think maybe a lot of folks don't quite know what to make of it, just because these are two teams that haven't really intersected with each other. The conferences haven't really intersected with each other very much. So, I saw some very mixed reactions on, the social media platforms and things like that. I think maybe these teams just don't quite know what to make of each other. Maybe the fan bases don't quite know what to make of each other. But I think this is a great game. Lenoir-Rhyne is a very explosive offense. Nothing like what you saw 10 years ago, Cary. They don't run that offense anymore. Almost a very even split between rush and pass on the production front. And there's a lot of different players involved. If you don't know anything about Lenoir-Rhyne and just look at their stat sheet, you're not really going to get a clear picture of who the standout players are, because it's a lot of them. I think they've got something like 6 or 7 players that have multiple touchdown receptions. Dwayne McGee, the running back, is really kind of the star player on that unit. But there's some other ball carriers and a lot of receivers that contribute there as well. That's another team. We talked about East Stroudsburg. It's another team that's been very successful with multiple quarterbacks this year. And that's actually just talking about their offense. And they have probably even more to talk about on the defensive side of the ball. Probably one of the best, linebacker and back four units that you'll find in this playoff field. They are extremely deep on the defensive side of the ball. They get to the ball in a hurry. They play very fast. They're aggressive on defense. They're really going to come at Shepherd a lot. I think Shepherd is going to have to try to attack them down the field, maybe kind of loosen them up a little bit. Do you think, with where Shepherd's been at in the last couple of weeks, do you think maybe they have an offense that can kind of push the ball down the field on Lenoir-Rhyne a little bit?
With what you just said, the last couple of weeks, if they are really at that point, they're starting to click. I think so. And again, I think looking back at Shepherd early in the season, it's like, are they going to click? Are they going to click? Are they going to click? They were kind of inconsistent. Of course, Kutztown went down to Shepherd and really kept them. I think that's the first time, in forever, that they didn't have a touchdown. They held them to 3 points. But, the last 2 weeks, I think, most impressive is, that win over East Stroudsburg down at Shepherd, and putting up a lot of points. Now, again, last week, you got to put it into context. They played Mercyhurst in the crossover action. Mercyhurst defense was, ranked number 16 out of the 16 teams in the PSAC. But again, you still got to go out and play the game. But, I think with, Shepherd, again, it's hard to compare anybody to that offense they had last year, with 4 guys going on to have opportunities in the league. Their quarterback from last year, in October, last year he was playing against, and winning a game against Westchester. And then he's, going out and, playing and winning a game against the Raiders. So, that was a special group. But, you got to take a look at what they have right now. Seth Morgan, their quarterback, is the top quarterback in the PSAC East. And one of the things, didn't really talk about it earlier, but you look at, the offensive line that Slippery Rock had in the East, the comparable piece there is, with Shepherd. Shepherd has 4 guys out of their offensive line that were either PSAC East first or second team selections that just came out today. So that, and, the ability to have a balanced attack, I think, Malachi Brown has really come on. He's one of the top running backs, in the PSAC, here towards the end of the year. He was a second team selection, and those things that just came out today, first team, Seth Morgan, a couple offensive linemen, wide receiver, Jeremiah Taylor, so they have the ability to, be a balanced attack as well. But definitely if they can come out, clicking on all cylinders, like you said, push the ball downfield, that would definitely help. But, as far as, inside the box with the offensive line that they have going up against, what you talked about with a very, stout defense, inside the box, I think it's going to be a great matchup.
I do too. And I actually really, at this point, wish I was still living within an hour of Hickory. I lived in Charlotte for about 7 years. I wish I was still within an hour of Hickory, because I would love to be at this game. I think it's going to be phenomenal. I hope everyone that's there, we'll have a lot of friends there. I hope everyone has a great time and really enjoys that one. I think it's a toss-up game. I know Lenoir-Rhyne was kind of getting most of the favor in the picks. I think this is a toss-up game. Shepherd's got a lot of big game experience. This year, I think they played the tougher schedule. If I look at Lenoir-Rhyne's schedule, the 2 best teams they played, those games didn't go great. They lost at Wingate. We're kind of lucky to get out with an OT win at Limestone. The other games that they won, they played very well, dominated a lot of teams that weren't quite on their level. I think if you swapped their schedules, I think Shepherd has a 10-1 record as well. So I think this is probably a more even matchup than a lot of people think it is. All right, so let's go on to our last game. I think we're kind of both looking at this as probably our game of the week. Of course, it involves the PSAC champion, the newly crowned CIAA champion, Virginia Union, and it's the game that we just didn't expect. And Cary, you and I are both going to be at this one on Saturday because it's pretty close to home for both of us. And again, this is one where a lot of people are kind of figuring, wow, I don't know that team. We got to go learn about them. So we're going to talk about both these teams for a couple minutes, help you kind of get acquainted with them. I think Virginia Union, I've said this pretty much all this season, I think Virginia Union has been the best team in the CIAA for the last 2 years. If you have been following the PSAC for a long time, you probably remember that the CIAA was in Super Region 1 for quite a few years. I think it was about 2008 or 9 through 2016 or 17. I might have, be off a year here on either side of that. But the CIAA was in this region for a long time, and we saw some of those teams in the playoffs. And there wasn't a lot of success for those teams, other than Winston-Salem State had a really good run for a couple of years. Not a lot of success. Don't compare this Virginia Union team to some of those teams that you might have seen in the past. This is a really good football team. They are very strong and very physical at the line of scrimmage. Defensively, they're very fast at linebacker. They play very aggressively. One of the best run-stopping defenses in all of Division II. I think that's going to be a really tough matchup for Kutztown's O-line. I think Kutztown needs to have a plan to loosen them up with a pass. Last week, they used quarterback draws and screens very successfully. We'll see if they kind of have that mixed in. But I think it's going to be a very difficult matchup for the Kutztown offense. And on defense, what I'm really excited to see is can Kutztown stop or slow down Virginia Union's run game? They've got a really good offensive line. And of course, we have to talk about one of the best players in all Division II, Jada Byers, the running back for Virginia Union. Cary, we've kind of reminisced and thrown it back a little bit. I'm going to give the PSAC followers a name that goes back a decade. Franklin Kouyaté, the Harlan Hill Trophy winning running back from Bloomsburg, if PSAC fans remember him. Jada Byers reminds me a lot of him because he is deceptively powerful. He's not very big, as most D2 backs aren't, but he's slippery, he's quick, but he is deceptively powerful, always gets tackled going forward, almost impossible to get him behind the line of scrimmage. So this Virginia Union team brings a lot to the table on both sides of the ball. The physicality that Kutztown played with last week was so impressive to me. And I hope that they rebound and bring the same type of effort this week, because Virginia Union is going to play in a very similar way.
Well, just taking a look at the whole body of work with Kutztown. Of course, they got off to the slow start, losing week 1 to Assumption and giving up a bunch of points in the fourth quarter to Cal and losing that one early on, and then they've been pretty much lights out since then. Again, the thing that you have to give to Kutztown is you look at the other teams from the PSAC there in Super Region 1, they beat them all. They beat Shepherd, they beat East Stroudsburg, and they beat Slippery Rock. So a little bit more points scored in that East Stroudsburg game, but they shut down the two teams we were talking about with the offenses in the PSAC with last week with Slippery Rock and also what they did down at Rams Field, at Shepherd, shutting them down. So, that said, Coach Clemens, and I got to say this, and I've said this before, it's like you take a look at that roster. They bring in guys, they recruit guys, they coach the heck out of those guys. Again, no disrespect to anybody that's plugging holes, getting kids out of the portal, but, they bring in guys and they develop them. And, one name that I definitely have to throw out here is linebacker Tyler Wary. Again, at that game I was at when East Stroudsburg was at Kutztown this year, I think I made a comment about it. You could be outside the stadium and know that Tyler Wary was a difference maker, with his name just being announced. And he was lights out again in the PSAC championship game. So super thrilled for him. He was, today the PSAC East defensive player of the year, but that group, Coach Farga, the defensive coordinator, has those guys clicking. And, I just think it's going to be a great test for them. But again, playing against some pretty high scoring offenses, you throw in the Slippery Rocks and the Shepherds there, they're only averaging giving up 14 points a game. And, again, what they did, and it's not just about the guys in the box. Again, those 3 picks, and we got one up on the screen here, the one that made, the Sports Center top 10. They were great, against the run, and they were great against the pass, and on offense too, maybe not the big numbers going up, but, again, they had a great running game last week. And, looking at, the running back position there, Darrell Davis McNeil had, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was named the PSAC championship player of the game. And again, the physicality on both sides of the ball, of Kutztown is going to be a key to this, playing with that same intensity, playing, mistake-free football, ball control, is going to be huge, this week as they take on Virginia Union.
Yeah, and turnovers are the thing that kind of stand out to me in the 2 toughest games Kutztown was in all year, at Shepherd and last week against Slippery Rock. I think they had 3 interceptions last week against, one of the best passing offenses in the country. And if you throw back to week 4 down at Shepherd, I think they got 2 more turnovers during this podcast from that game. I mean, that was 6 turnovers they got in that game. So if they can get a couple turnovers against Virginia Union, I think that's a real difference maker. But again, the Panthers are a very fundamental football team, very sound, very well coached. And at this point, they're used to doing a lot of winning. So I know that they're excited for this opportunity. It's a big chance for them to come up and play a conference champion. I know that they're excited for it. So I think it's going to be a fantastic game, fantastic atmosphere out there at Kutztown. So those are our games for this week, Cary. I'm really pumped for it. Again, I think the action we're going to see out of this bracket is going to be really, really exciting. If we're able to come back next week and do the same thing, we'll be able to talk about Tiffin. That's a real wild card out there that we didn't really get to talk about much tonight, just because they're idle this week. Really outstanding football team, a program that just doesn't have many weaknesses. You don't win 11 games by accident. So excited to break them down. Talk about them taking on the winner of Kutztown and Slippery Rock. My friend, this was fun. I really appreciate you joining me to do this. Hopefully we'll be able to come back, do it again next week when we've got some more games to talk about, some more big ones coming up. Really appreciate you being here. For all the fans on the socials, let's make sure we kind of put this up. I think most people know where to find us. We're out there. We keep ourselves pretty visual. We're easy to find. We like to interact with you. So find us, follow us. We'll be very active throughout the weekend. And we will hopefully be back with you again next week. Cary, thanks for being here, my friend.
Absolutely. I hope so. I hope we're back again next week. And I will see you in a few days up at Andre Reed Stadium.
All right. Sounds good.